If you've got a facilities manager that has awareness of a bunch of buildings, a small number of buildings, that's an amazing start. I'd actually say it's more attuned to actually making progress than an enormous estate where you don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Whereas you've got someone or a couple of people or a small team that knows the ins and outs. They're the lifeblood of making the mechanisms and the services work. They know where all the spaces are. So what I would start with is basically starting up to draw up your floor plans. And if you haven't got a CAD team, there are other ways. Take a photo of an emergency evacuation diagram. It's a start.
Yep.
Stick it in a your SharePoint folder or a file drive. At least you've got something to start with.
So 600 buildings plus 100,000 plus assets.
Absolutely.
Jade, you've been spending 20 years on moving all this disparate data, bringing it all into one central space. Like, what got you into this?
That's a really good question. I didn't come from a facilities management background. I came from studying industrial design at RMIT, and I basically found myself in an internship in America working in the exhibition and trade show manufacturing industry for car shows. And basically the company I worked for was an aluminium extrusion company that created stands and frames for lighting, etc.
Okay.
And that was just outside of Baltimore and Washington, DC. And I was basically doing 3D CAD, which was basically for about 3 months, where the guy who was doing that role was getting married, was going on honeymoon, and said, why don't we get someone from Australia to come and hang out and do this CAD work, etc. And then after I did that, I spent a couple of years travelling and found myself back in Melbourne thinking, what can I do with the next chapter of my career? And then I basically found myself designing playgrounds and shade sales for a little family business in Melbourne. And then after I did that for about a year, there was this job that was advertised in the old-fashioned Age newspaper, the paper kind.
The trading section.
Yes. The actual paper kind that doesn't exist anymore. And it said...
The classifieds.
Absolutely. It said property and buildings, AutoCAD. I thought, I like property. Yeah. I like buildings.
I know AutoCAD.
I can do AutoCAD.
Yes.
What's all this about? And then fast forward, about a year, they called me up and said, Jade, we'd like you to come and talk to us and see whether you're interested in this role. And effectively, I discovered an environment or a sector that has this enormous opportunity for improvement. And I never knew that a university owns their own buildings at that time. I never knew that we had hundreds and hundreds of buildings that the university owned. And I was just really excited to apply my industrial design background, where I came from a place of 3D modelling and drawing in 3D to a paper-based, PDF-based 2D environment.
Wow.
And I was like, you don't have a digital twin or a 3D model of your campus? And like, no, that's the first thing we'd like you to do.
Oh, wow.
So within a week of working at the University of Melbourne, I built them a 3D model for planning and master planning purposes. So I highlighted every single building that we owned, the ones that we leased, and the ones that we had with partnerships in hospitals. And for the first time in the history of the university, we had a 3D master planning model that we could work off in 2005. Wow. And I've pretty much been, sort of cultivating a digital estate, as it were, since 2005.
I can imagine the university being one of the oldest universities in Australia. Their buildings, there's heritage-listed buildings right through to brand new facilities that have just been finished and opened.
Absolutely.
I can imagine some of that just would never have been a thought when they were creating the university back in the day.
No, I think one interesting point around the University of Melbourne and many, what we call Group of 8, Group of 9 research institutions. So we are research focused. So we have a history of faculties effectively, they were running their own businesses, as it were, or faculties independently, much like they do in the UK and in some places of the US. And the university in the past 20 years have been consolidating and centralising the data. So it's quite understandable that we actually didn't have a wide portfolio view of the number of properties that we managed, because each of the faculties were managing their own portfolios.
Yes.
So we have our 7 faculties, and history of those faculties they've been very successful. You know, They're empires with themselves, and so we were bringing them along with this journey of centralisation, which includes IT, facilities management, and all of those independent services, property management, consolidating that to a central service. Part of that big journey for me was digitising and understanding what property assets we had, where are they located, is there a lease or relationship agreement in place, and how do we get that on board into a system?
Yeah. So just on that point about how each faculty basically did their own thing, is there a little bit of rivalry between the different faculties?
I don't think
so. And then how
so.
did they handle sort of it all sort of coming under one umbrella?
I don't think so. Look, I think prior to me starting the university, the faculties always had a relationship with each other. You know, we wouldn't. You know, they work in harmony. They were already sharing facilities. They were sharing, greenhouses, etc. So there was a harmony already going on.
Yes.
It was more around building sort of a consolidation of the data and the business insight around the wider portfolio.
Yes.
So many of the things that we worked with the faculties were already in place. Like the faculties were already sharing some spaces. They were doing some fantastic things.
Yeah.
But it was just now a process of formalising those arrangements and making sure that we've got the right square meterage in space, so we know which buildings are actually in the database, so that we can make sure that all of that's covered by our facility services and insurance and all the like. So it wasn't like they were completely disparate. I think it's more that they had their own, they were more autonomous than what they are today.
Yes.
But that enables them to also leverage, the cross-pollination of having, the momentum of the wider university, being bigger than the number of its parts.
Yes, absolutely. Given that they were so siloed and there would have just been data everywhere, how did you go about collating? What were some of the challenges in getting all of that together and making the change from being analog to digital?
Well, I was very lucky. I inherited an area where there are some good spatial systems in place. I have to say that. Some really good spatial systems and processes, and some really, really great people were able to start digitising in AutoCAD, the base information. So we had a really good starting point.
Great.
And there was a piece of work that was done to scan some of the historical paper-based plans from the 1800s, the 19th century, through to the 1950s, etc. So there was a start. It was actually a really good start. There was a good structure and a baseline to work with. But what we kind of didn't have a greater perspective on was the wider properties, that maybe that there was a hospital that was under a shared arrangement between the faculty and the university. So the core properties was a good starting point, but we had to really focus on those wider clinical regional sites that were beyond the Parkville and the Werribee campus.
Yeah.
And basically a series of years of discovery and collaboration with the faculty. So there was really, really great collaboration over the years with the facilities managers saying, oh, did you know we've actually got a shed out there and, it's on this street and this is what we use it for. And there was never a reluctance to share information. It was always, great. I've got some great drawings in a cupboard for you. It's been there for 30 years.
Yes.
Can you help scan it for us, etc. So there was a lot of goodwill and intellectual property that have been sitting in the brains of many, many facilities managers and directors, that they were just really, they really appreciated the opportunity to share that with us and get it into a recorded system.
Yeah, they needed to upload that somewhere.
Exactly, yeah.
What were some of the, I know you've spoken in the past about some of the main challenges and headwinds you faced. What would you say were the biggest challenges that you faced?
I think that some of the biggest challenges we faced was there was a lot of disparate data sets. There were a lot of great data sets out there, but enormous amounts of Excel spreadsheets. And I have to say, I love Excel. There's nothing wrong with a good Excel spreadsheet, so long as you've got someone that's managing that data and maintaining and keeping it up to date. So I guess one of the biggest challenges was more around ensuring that we had visibility over what data sets exist and was it in a system. If it's in a system, does it have a data owner or a custodian?
Yeah.
Is someone actually responsible for checking the data and keeping it up to date?
Keeping it up to date, yeah.
Yeah, otherwise we would have great data sets we find, but we're not sure if there's an owner and how relevant the information still is.
Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest challenges for us was figuring out how many systems and platforms are there and how many data sets are out there, and then which ones do we prioritise to start to merge and bring towards a central location.
Yeah.
And I think that starts with finding the right people. To be able to find a facilities manager or a research manager that's maintaining a fantastic spreadsheet is like gold. This person's been here for 40 years. They know everything about the lab. They know all the square metre of the building was amazing.
Yeah.
And to catch that person while they're still at the university and transfer that knowledge into a recorded database was something that was is really invaluable.
Yeah. Very interesting.
I wonder, like, as you were talking just then, you mentioned finding the right people. People management when it comes to change like this, like you were making a huge change. The goal was obviously to be able to understand exactly what the portfolio looked like, understand how to manage all the assets across the portfolio, which is quite large. Managing that change of moving from one system, from multiple systems to one system, how did that look?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for me, it was the university recognised, I think it was around 2015, they recognised that there was enormous value in a shared services model. So prior to 2015, we had IT in one part of the organisation, we had facilities and property in another part of the organisation, and we had finance in another part of the organisation, as well as projects. The challenge with that is that each of those arms had their own silos and systems, etc. And the university, in their wisdom, consolidated those portfolios into one shared IT and property and facilities model, which was absolutely fundamental to being able to consolidate data. And it was IT came on board with projects and finance and all of the business services, area security, maintenance, the works, including space management at the time. And that enabled us to really align our best practices and our best IP together to build that momentum, that ecosystem as we talk about in these days around sharing data.
Yeah, interesting. And so is that one platform that you moved to, or there's still multiple platforms, but you connect them to a central platform? You know, what does it actually look like?
Great question. So fantastic credit to our CTO at the time, Byron Collins, who set up the university's first enterprise architecture team with a data lake.
Okay.
So a data lake was set up.
Can you explain for me, what is a data lake?
I'm not an IT person, so please forgive me if I get my terminology wrong. But my general understanding is a central cloud-based platform that can be internally hosted or externally that brings in data sets from across the organisation in a structured format.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I think you can have structured and unstructured, but essentially it's a structured format. So we can bring in finance information, student enrolment information, space information, HR, et cetera, to gain business enterprise portfolio business insight.
Yeah.
And so for the credit to Byron and the enterprise architecture team, they brought on this data lake, and now we understood the full value of business insight and not keeping all of our data in little Excel silos.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. The transformation, like, where did you know where to start? Like, what assessing and understanding the scope and what you had. How did that look on a real life practical level?
Yeah, so effectively we had a good understanding of where our core properties existed. Okay, so but we knew that by collaborating and reaching out to our faculties and our facilities managers in those faculties, they were very collaborative and helpful around saying, "Oh, Jade, have you recorded the hospital location that we have over at X hospital? Or have you recorded the research institute over at Y location?" And that really helped us, that collaboration put us in with the key contacts of those facilities managers and general managers that can help us with onboarding that information.
Yeah.
And so at the starting point was reaching out to the people that we know and the data sets that we know of, and we have a conversation. And we started to build year on year our portfolio. So generally speaking, when I started, we were around the 250,000 square metres range,
Okay.
250,000 square metres, and now we're at 1.1. million
Mil.
square metres of
Yeah.
space. So that includes all of our hospital, clinical sites, our residential student accommodation, research institutes which might be shared with other universities as well as other partners, and everything, and commercial sites as well, where the university may have received bequests from former alumni and other research partners that have bequested property to the university that we're now using for university purposes. So that process of discovery really was about the people and the relationships and that knowledge. And these people have put their lives and souls into the university, and they have such care and respect and drive for ensuring the university is a fantastic place of research. and innovation.
Interesting.
Our listeners, the bulk of them would probably be facility managers of a single site, maybe a couple of sites around the country, nothing to the scale of a university. But a lot of them would be facing problems with disparate data or data they don't have a single integrated system where everything is digitized and up to date. If they were trying to start something like what you've done and get something digital, like a digital estate or a digital agency of what have we got? Where would they start? What would you recommend?
So what I would recommend is that it all starts with having people that were working and collaborating together. So if you've got a facilities manager that has awareness of a bunch of buildings, a small number of buildings, that's an amazing start. I'd actually say it's more attuned to actually making progress than an enormous estate where you don't know where to start. Because you've got someone or a couple of people or a small team that knows the ins and outs. They're the lifeblood of making the mechanisms and the services work. They know where all the spaces are. So what I would start with is basically starting up to draw up your floor plans. And if you haven't got a CAD team, there are other ways. Take a photo of an emergency evacuation diagram. It's a start. Stick it in a your SharePoint folder or a file drive. At least you've got something to start with, right? Doesn't have to be in AutoCAD, doesn't have to be in 3D, doesn't have to be a digital twin. I've always said 2D drawings was the digital twin in the 90s. Right? A floor plan is having a floor plan and knowing the square metres from an emergency evacuation point is a start. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, that evacuation diagram was created on a computer. So if you can track down whoever created that file, you can get the source file from it. And you've probably actually got more data than you actually realised. It just needs a little bit of digging and investigation work. And that's what we did back in the day. We basically took photos of evacuation diagrams, and then we followed up with the consultants or the surveyors who created them, and we said, can we have that source file, even if it's a PDF? And then we worked our way from scaling up in AutoCAD and measuring it so it's accurate.
It's incredible. So you've got this digital twin, this 3D model of the university, but it's about a lot more than just having a 3D model. It's about asset management and not just the external building itself, but everything inside the building. That's what the goal is. Is that right? Absolutely.
So I'm not a huge fan of digital twin because it's kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you decide to focus only on what you're going to have for dessert, what you're going to eat for dessert, right? And you're not thinking about all the other meals, the fantastic meals and the preparation that goes into your meal. You're thinking about the awesome dessert at the end. And that's how I see the digital twin. The digital twin is the output, but all the enabling work that needs to happen, transferring information for your facilities management teams, getting the data into an AutoCAD or an Excel spreadsheet, and slowly building up a picture of what your portfolio looks like to finally get to the cool gamified, walkthrough experience of a digital twin. That's really later. Start simple. Start with what you know, as we talked about. And so I really do value the hard work that all those facilities managers do and the amazing work that gets unsung effectively and to document that in some way. So whether that be an image of a floor plan or whether it be an asset list of in a spreadsheet of what's being maintained and what the cost is of that, it's a really great starting point.
What did stock taking and developing that asset registry look like for a university the size of University of Melbourne?
So in 2023, we undertook what we call a digital asset stock take. And there's a video that we can share with you guys on that. But effectively, it was a matter of really myself and my small team going through all of our drives and finding all these Excel spreadsheets of the asset registers that were handed over from all the project managers and all the companies and all the architects and all the builders. And we consolidated 1,500 spreadsheets over 20 years.
Wow.
1,500 over 20 years.
That's crazy.
And between the first version of those handed over documents, there would have been things that had to get replaced. So there would have been errors.
Absolutely. So we thought to ourselves, how are we actually going to do this?
Yeah.
And so we had 1,500 spreadsheets. We don't know what's been replaced. We have a rough idea, but we're not sure what data's out of date, what's duplicated, etc.
Yeah.
And the university is very fortunate. We have an engineering and IT internship program. So the university offers students in their final semester of data science, engineering and IT courses 350 hours to be placed in a host company to help them with data cleansing, applying scripts like Python, etc., to clean exactly what we talked about, spreadsheets.
Interesting.
And so we started with, I think it was 2 interns, and they scraped all the data from the 1,500 spreadsheets, and it came up with something like 100,000 assets that we believe are linked to a space in the university. Yeah.
Wow.
Got us to a point, and got us to a point where we believe that that the terminologies, there was a vast difference between how something was described from contractor A to contractor B, but they were able to use their Python coding and AI, a little bit of sprinkling of AI to give us a guesstimate around how many assets we think we've got. And then the next step was then to validate that with our contractors' databases and say, are we anywhere close to reality? Have we got a bunch more? Do we have not as many as we thought we did, etc.? But without the engineering and IT and data science students to help us with that data crunching, it would have been me and my team doing old-fashioned, VLOOKUPs in Excel, taking 5 years to get through it, right? Whereas these kids
just
are
upload it all into Grok.
Amazing. And with the Melbourne model, they whilst they might be studying, AI in engineering and IT and information systems and spatial systems, they come from a range of cross-pollinated areas. Some of them coming from finance with a bit of surveying and GIS and architecture and economics. So you're getting this really cross-collaboration insights from these fantastic kids, and that really got us going.
Yeah.
I could spend all day about the internship program.
Yeah, little minions.
Yeah.
And so
They're amazing. They're amazing.
So I guess the ultimate purpose of that asset list or the register is to make better decisions, is it?
Absolutely. Have insight on how we move forward on our asset management, our procurement of assets, our life cycle asset management as well. But flowing on to things like insurance and all those kinds of obligations around OH&S and compliance, and to ensure that our assets are up to date and they're not going to fail on us on day one of semester opening and all that, and the timetable's in alignment, and we start to optimise our facilities. So, for example, we start to clean spaces around timetabling. So when there's a public event on the weekend and we know that there is going to be a huge lecture theatre full of people, we prepare for that. We know what kind of materials are in that space and what kind of chemical cleaners and equipment we need to target cleaning rather than schedule clean. And so there's a range of use cases out there, some which I can share with you later.
And so then practically, so that data that's output is basically then shared with the FM to make the decision to then get a contractor involved, or you kind of just go straight to the contractor and say this is required?
So kind of getting back to the whole data lake scenario, not that I'm an IT person, but generally speaking, you want your data to be structured.
Yes.
So apples are apples, right? A PowerPoint's a PowerPoint. Doesn't matter which contractor provides you with the data. Whatever is PowerPoint is defined as, or if it's got a special code, it should be the same as contractor A, B, and C. And that way, when you bring all that data and consolidate it in consistent format into the structured data lake, then you can apply your work orders to that.
Yes.
And then you can start to track and say how many work orders are coming in from, I don't know, mice traps or rodent traps, for example.
Yeah.
And we can say, oh, for whatever reason, this particular building A seems to be having a lot of traps going off, right? What's going on there? Maybe there's a few cracks in the floorboards, who knows?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we can start to really play with really cool tools like IoT sensors.
Yep.
So one of the most amazing things the Smart Campus team delivered a couple of years ago was rat sensors that basically could detect the rodent or the mouse going into the device, and the digital twin, the 2D digital twin that we have, the Smart Campus platform, would alert you when there's a trap that's been activated.
Yeah.
Rather than constantly manually checking traps all over the university.
You just go straight to the one that...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you start to glean insights around IoT sensors that provide us temperature, humidity, people management, how occupied is that building? Have we only got one person in this room but the air conditioning is running, etc.?
Yeah.
And we start to have, merge towards this concept of a smart city or a smart campus.
Yeah, wow.
And the platform that is running that, is that something that has been built in-house, or that's something that, you've taken from the marketplace and tweaked to fit? Do you know what I mean?
I think from my understanding is it's an ecosystem. So the data lake itself is an in-house built, but leveraging third-party platforms such as AWS, etc. But there's a whole range of technologies that have been built in-house.
That link to that lake.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have external platforms that come that bring data into that lake. We have internal platforms that are built internally. We have our fantastic engineering and IT researchers that actually build their own IoT sensors.
Oh,
and
interesting.
measure, for research purposes, humidity and temperature, right?
Yes.
And we brought that onto the Smart Campus platform. We have third-party IoT sensors.
Yes.
We have people counters from third parties. We have a CMX platform, etc. So it's an ecosystem for sure. But just like any data set, those ecosystem platforms need to have data owners and platform owners, because once they get siloed or they get isolated, then we don't know their currency and how to keep them up to date.
Yeah, the data goes stale.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a lot of our facility managers that would be listening are probably thinking, well, I want to make sure that all my assets are being maintained, and that I know I'm up to date on their life cycle and all of that sort of stuff. How does something like what you guys have built direct them towards that as an end goal, like as the future?
I think for me, my learnings from the facility management industry is that generally speaking, we are a really proactive doing bunch of people.
Yep.
But we're not so akin to understanding how the IT side of things works. So many facilities areas don't have funding for IT systems and platform or even data crunching. And in our little team in the university, we were similar. So I looked at other opportunities like the student internship program. And so it might be that, for example, our engineering faculty don't only offer interns for my team, it's actually designed for external companies like facilities management companies to host a student for their semester for 3 months to help them data crunch and provide insights into their Excel spreadsheets and say, you know what, most of your orders are coming from reactive orders are coming from gutters, leaking gutters, for example, and glean insights from those spreadsheets and help them clean that data and use their coding and AI, especially these days, and get them started. So I really recommend looking where you have opportunities to have interns. And guess what? At the end of the internship program, they get fantastic CV, you give them a LinkedIn reference, and they've got actual outputs that they've delivered, dashboards in Microsoft Power BI on insights to your business that help them get a job in the next role. And all of our interns we hosted with those guys all got jobs.
Yeah.
And they come out of the Melbourne Business School, is that right?
No, this is the Faculty of Engineering and IT, but there's also science. There's a data science program where they ask you for a business problem, and the students run a research project using their AI and analytics and all their skills, coding skills, to come up with basically a hypothesis around how they can solve your problem using data science. It's amazing.
Interesting.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So what is the end goal for this? transformation that you guys have done? It's still in the works. It's been 20 years in the making.
20 years in the making.
And it's still going, right?
Still going. So I guess the end goal is we are moving towards a more agile digital AI environment. So we want to actually ask our digital estate questions. I would love to say in 2 years from now or 5 years from now, rather than me searching for information to answer a question, I'd love it to be a chat GPT. Show me, University Digital Estate, tell me how many buildings have actually had leaks over the past 12 months that should actually have their gutters replaced before they actually become a major issue.
Yeah.
But also check that the buildings that we're looking at aren't going to be demolished as part of the master plan anyway. And are there any heritage overlays to that building or significant trees that might affect any demolition or redevelopment to that? Ask your digital estate questions and for it to use insights to provide you data-driven answers to those questions.
Yeah, and further to that, you could also have it, once a day say, hey, this is coming up. I think this might happen, blah, 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 blah.
Absolutely. And I think for me, really moving away from a reactive approach, as you guys have fantastically discussed in your episodes. We want to move to a proactive approach where we've got drones and things attached to our trucks that pick up the rubbish and tell us when a street light's out or when there's a crack in the footpath, etc., that automatically creates that work order and categorise it based on the AI image. Is it a huge crack or is it a minor hairline crack? And then prioritise that with the work order with the contracting company to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we get to the smart city concept where we're proactive and we're really getting to, the concept of known unknowns and then unknown unknowns. I think that's how it goes. I can't remember now, but it's a fantastic concept.
I should have talked about that last week.
Exactly. Yeah, you guys are the experts on that. But we're just focusing on what the knowns are. But I'd love to get to a point where we can, what are the unknowns?
Yeah, absolutely. And so a facility manager who works at the university somewhere, in one of the facilities, one of the faculties, what does a day in the life of them look like? And how has this impacted their jobs?
I think I'm probably not the best person to answer, but from the facility managers that I know, it can be so vast. You could be working at a tiny research institute with only 1 or 2 buildings through to a whole campus, or even down, say, in the country. You could be working in a research facility in our bushfire research facility at Creswick campus. So it's very varied.
Yes.
You could be managing 20 buildings, or you could be managing half of an enormous campus, and you have precincts. You might become a precinct manager of a large campus where the campus is too large and complex to have one person maintain it. It might be you're a precinct manager where you look after the law and economics portfolio and someone else looks after architecture and science, and engineering portfolio, etc. And so there are many lenses and profiles that you could be as a facilities manager. Just because you're starting out at the university managing one portfolio, you might actually move to another portfolio that's completely different, have different use cases, like our Drama and Arts VCA, Faculty of Fine Arts in South Bank campus. They have a fantastic program where you have special unit requirements for dramatic art and theatre.
Yeah, and how is the digital transformation, how is that impacting their day-to-day job? Like, is it making it easier for them? Is it predicting things that they could never have thought about getting on top of? They were more reactive. Have you started to notice a change in being more proactive, or is that still to come?
Absolutely. We've noticed an increased improvement in customer satisfaction ratings and also turnaround time for service. We've got a large platform that tracks all of our requests, and then and gleans insights from those. And our clients, we're seeing improvement on how our response times are being delivered, because back in the old days when we were all more siloed, the facilities manager or the faculty, we used to have to try and do the snakes and ladder approach of trying to find 10 different people to find the answer, who to get to give them that response, whereas now we've kind of more streamlined that approach.
Yes.
And what we're hearing is the feedback is being reported that, the response times are quicker and the service and the quality and the standards are better than they've ever been before.
Yeah, good.
That's really good. Looking ahead, like what's the future? Like what's the end goal of the digital estate?
Yeah, I think we talked about the unknown unknowns. I think that's what it's called. And we also talked about the future of AI, where we can ask questions to the digital estate. And I think for me, the future is more around once we get the answers to the questions that we're looking for, we can basically better plan for our growth or divestment of properties, or basically adjusting and reacting to economic conditions, such as the significant increase in international students or decrease or international student caps, or it might be the university wants to expand into another state of Australia or overseas. And then, all of our data that we've been collecting and analysing and putting into our smart digital campus can actually help us say, well, you know what, there's a development opportunity over in X. Look at the data, the census data tells us that X, Y, Z, here's an opportunity. So having data in a format that we can use it to our best knowledge really sets us to ensure the university is sustainable economically, but also for the environment as well, our carbon footprint and all of those elements, and it's an accessible and inclusive campus, for people with all kinds of disabilities and accessibility challenges, and having that having that sort of ecosystem, if you like, where we are no longer just reacting to what's gone wrong after the event, and we can actually foresee and start predicting future events would be absolutely amazing. But that might not be in my lifetime. I'd love to see, robots doing that for us, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
And showing us how it's done, and see the virtual facilities manager.
You saw the robot on the weekend?
I did see Optimus on the weekend, the Tesla humanoid robot. Anyway.
Lots of those walking around your campuses.
Actually, I do have this is a left field question. Of the 600 buildings, when you were doing the initial audit, did you find any that were actually not being used?
It's an interesting question. So
they didn't even know they had.
Yeah, it's like, I just thought that faculty was using that one,
I think when it comes to utilisation, I think for us it's probably more at a space level.
Okay.
Because it's probably more around, there's a storage space, and we weren't aware that someone's put some research storage in there that's no longer active anymore and hasn't been open for a while. So it's probably more around the spaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out who is the owner of that space, or who is the occupant of that space, as we would say.
Yeah.
And do they really need it?
Do they really need
Yes.
it? And what is the actual occupancy of that space? I think one of the goals that one of the challenges that we always ask ourselves when it comes to research is, what is the definition of utilisation when it comes to research? It's hard to put your finger on it.
Yeah.
Some research you can just use the laboratory for maybe once a month, and that's running the research really, really hot. Other research you're in there every hour, 8 hours a day. And so it's hard to put a finger or a pulse on what is the definition of utilisation when it comes to research. And whilst a space might look unused, it's actually delivering enormous amounts of research. It's just that it doesn't need a high amount of frequency.
Yeah.
And so then we talk about, is it possible then to share that research space with another research project, And then that talks about smart bookings and smart utilisation, and making sure the bookings align with preparation times and all that stuff. So when it comes to the questions around utilisation, it's really interesting to know about what's your definition of not being used, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it looks like it's empty, but there's something red hot being
that's so
beautifully
interesting.
delivered. And we're like, who knew?
How do you even go about? So, say there is a lab that's getting used, once every 2 weeks, and you're saying for that program it's like quite hot, like that's a lot. But how do you actually go finding out who else is using this? Like, do you kind of just put a message out on a message board?
We kind of start with our facilities, our faculty's facility contacts.
Yeah.
Those guys are fantastic. They are across everything.
They know what's going on.
They're there day and night, weekends in some cases as well. They know when there's events going on. They know when there's research happening.
Yeah.
They know that that this equipment will be running from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then it might run at 11 p.m. to midnight. So really to start with with your contacts. But and as I said, we can look to data and IoT centres and see, there's movement in that room, or there's been a change in the way the BAS system or the air conditioner has been behaving, and then we reach out and we reach out to that local contact and say, we've noticed something interesting here. Can you go check on it for us?
Yeah.
So it's really about. It's not about replacing the roles of facilities manager. It's actually more empowering. I feel like it's actually going back to the old days where the facility manager is more empowered than ever, but with data.
Yeah. A lot of facility managers that I speak to are going through big changes in terms of utilisation and occupancy since pandemic. And they're trying to assess, well, we've got 7 levels of this building in our offices, and there's pressure from above. Maybe we need to downsize, but they're finding it hard to track who's they don't have desk bookings or like a digital platform necessarily to run it. If you were giving advice to someone who was starting out from scratch, had nothing, what would you sort of say to them?
Absolutely. So utilisation is always an important hot topic because it's generally speaking, it's the second most highest expense of an organisation after salaries.
Yes.
And so utilisation is always a hot topic to discuss. Now, as you pointed out, not every organisation has people counters or technologies to track.
They don't have the IoT.
No, absolutely. And back in the day, we would do old-fashioned space validation audits effectively. We'd have a bunch of students, including myself, we would walk the hallways and count on the hour how many students were using a room in a booked classroom. I remember that was the first thing I did on day one, and I got a blister in my toe because I bought brand new leather shoes to impress, and I was walking the corridors of the chemistry building every single hour for the entire day.
Just jotting down.
Yeah, and by the end of the day I had this enormous blister. How's that for OH&S?
Yeah.
But we gleaned, we didn't need any digital twins, we didn't need any digital sensors or people counters. We could see how many students on the hour were in each of the lecture theatres and the classrooms, and we put that into an Excel spreadsheet. And there you go. We had a live utilisation snapshot, which was highly valuable.
Yeah.
Highly valuable thinking about planning. Are there any spaces that you could share that timetable with, or devolve those spaces to the shared pool?
Yeah. Well, it even affects, like you mentioned before, the HVAC systems and stuff like that. It affects all of that and the consumption of the office. If there's more people in, then it's going to work harder than if there was less people. And so knowing that and being able to adjust based on the data that we've collected over the last month, we can now start to implement some changes to our output.
Absolutely. And especially these days with workspaces, we're seeing more agile booking systems, like the old-fashioned term was hot desk.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then we went through a period calling it activity-based working. But we're really seeing a huge uptake since post-COVID. Many faculties are saying we'd really like to trial a pilot of a floor or half a floor on agile booking. Yep. So being able to book a desk for a couple of hours or half a day or a full day, as it were, and then share that desk at a ratio that's suitable. Yep.
Yeah.
And then it allows them to free up other parts of the portfolio to either hand back to the central pool for others to use it, or use it for research purposes or redevelopment of office space, etc.
You've just had, I know one of the buildings there has just gone through that whole change just recently on campus. 700 Swanson Street, I think?
Melbourne Connect.
Yeah, Melbourne Connect.
That's
They've just
my
gone.
building.
That's your building.
there you go.
There you
Literally drove from here, from Melbourne Connect. It's
there you go. They've just changed over to that booking and hot desk.
CereView system, yeah,
CereView
absolutely.
system, yeah.
So it's that's a fantastic example because it's effectively it's an industry hub. So we have the engineering faculty as their home. We have external private entities that are working as collaborators with the university, but also there are also completely external partners that are just basically renting space there, and it's a hub of innovation. So the idea is that some of the spaces you can actually have startups come in for a few hours, book a space, and they've got podcast recording studios as well. My floor has a podcast recording studio.
We could have come to you.
Absolutely. And you book it by the hour or half hour. And and it's there's an agile booking system, multiple cross collaboration. There's lunch and learns. You can actually go and You go and see an event on what a startup is doing or an industry hub partnership arrangement's going on, and you book by the hour or the day, depending on your flexibility. And so some of these smaller startups don't actually need a traditional bricks and mortar Monday to Friday office. It's a hybrid approach, and it's a really fun, exciting place to work.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything that you haven't been able to say on the podcast? I never asked this question, but I always feel like I should. Anything we haven't asked you that we should have asked you?
Well, I guess the other thing I'd probably like to share is for those facilities managers that are out there, and you might be in one building or a couple of buildings.
Yeah,
it's never too late to start. You know what? It's never too late to start. Reach out to me because we can put you in touch with the internship program or help you give you some tips on how to get started with a simple spreadsheet and get your database in order. It's never too late to start.
Yeah.
You know? So you may as well start the journey now.
Yes.
Because you'll be in a couple of years' time, be like, I wish I could use that AI, but I haven't got any data to use the AI.
Yeah,
with.
true. Because, from a facility manager's perspective, if they're only managing one facility, maybe two, there's nothing stopping them just doing it all in Excel. Yep. They don't need the fancy,
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool.
Then maybe you can throw that into a chat GPT and you can ask it some questions.
Yeah.
Right? But just start is the point. Don't let perfection get in the way of progress.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be perfect. 80-20 rule. That's what we always said. 80-20 rule.
Love that.
And work your way from there.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice because I think some people just don't know where to start. And so just...
Yeah. It can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. One of the first things I did in my first week was I was asked to go into this enormous storage room of as-built drawings. And there was literally boxes up to the ceiling, and this was for one research building, right? And I had to process those paper copies. That was my probation. My probation was I needed to process all these paper copies. There was something like 50 or 60 boxes worth within 6 months. And my point is, it felt like, oh my God, what have I got myself into here?
Where do I start?
Just start.
Yeah.
Start and just see how you go. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, geez, I've actually got through a quarter. I've got this Excel spreadsheet. Let's see what we can do with that.
Yeah.
And it's not quite this is still starting out, really. It's not the norm.
Early
it's
days.
Early days, so it's better to be an early adopter rather than being left behind and chasing your tail trying to catch up.
Early adopter. Actually, no issue. Even if your spreadsheets like ours were 20 years old, it's a start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw a fantastic presentation at the Facility Management Conference in Auckland last year. And when they had the Auckland floods, they basically were saying that the data that they had on the underground services of all the the stormwater ducts and pipes and everything, they said it wasn't great, but they said some data was better than no data.
Yeah.
That's what they said, and I totally believe that. You better have some data, so just start.
That's we're often getting facility managers sending us through floor plans so that we can measure it up and put together a program for them. And sometimes they say, it's not the best. And I say, it's better than me having to come out and draw it myself. Some data is better than no data.
Validating data is always better than drawing it from scratch.
That's it. That's it. I'd rather a photo of the emergency evacuation plan on the wall than having to come and step it out myself.
Exactly. So that would be my sort of take-home message. But reach out to me if you want some guidance, or would you like me to share?
Are you happy with us sharing your contact info on
absolutely
in the description?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Fantastic. Check out the link
down below. In the description, we'll put it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the pod.
Thanks so much for inviting me and being part of this fantastic podcast.
Cool. Thank you.